Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Dr. Schilling bringing this week's Wednesday Wellness Minutes. Say that fast 5 times, I dare you. This week's Wednesday Wellness Minutes, and this week we're going to talk about dementia. And dementia is a common problem, becoming ever more increasing every day. Fortunately, my brain works fine as long as my mouth can keep up with it. But if you're challenged with your memory and or cognitive functions and things like that, and or your loved one is, this is going to be important information for you. What we're going to be talking about is some basic indications as far as what you will see in people in your life, as far as your loved ones and friends and family, as well as what to do about it. But we're also going to talk about some of the lesser known things and how you can be impacted by them. So dementia is kind of a nebulous term. It's a big picture, big cloud. And so when you think about dementia, you think about things like Alzheimer's and people get general forgetfulness. Some people become combative and aggressive and end up going to memory care units and they just lose their mind. So 47.5 million people worldwide have dementia. And now that doesn't seem like a lot when you're talking about 8 billion people on the planet, but the baby boomers, for those of you out there, it's becoming more and more increasingly common. And as a result, 60 to 7% of the people at 65 years or older are going to experience that in their lifetime. And that's a big number because it's the most common cause of dementia, Alzheimer's that is. Alzheimer's is the biggest cause of dementia that we're aware of. 5.5 million people in the U.S., again, 5.5 million people out of 318 doesn't sound like a lot until it touches your life and you have a loved one that you have to put in a memory care unit or something like that. It can be very challenging for you to deal with. And then the number of people that are experiencing that is only going to increase because of the number of people that are reaching those latter years in their life and things like that. So it comes with loss of memory. Starts off pretty subtle, oh, honey, I forgot where the keys are, and seems to be more like a hassle. It's kind of an annoyance until the spouse, usually one or the other spouse, knows about it or realizes it, and they're like, Bob's not as sharp as he used to be. That's a pretty common one. But then it gets progressively worse. People are unable to recognize their loved ones, or they get lost, like they go driving to the local store and they end up having a, like Gilligan's Island, a 3-hour tour. And then they end up going somewhere and saying, can you tell me where I'm at? So people can get lost, and it can get scary for those people that love them. But they can also be unable to care for themselves. As a result, then they either have to be living with a family member or be put in a home where they'll take care of them full time, an assisted living facility and or memory care unit. At certain points, people can get to the point where they have to be constantly watched and monitored because they could be hurtful or combative to themselves or others and hurt themselves or others. It's kind of a big problem. So one of the main ways they look at this is they do PET scans, so positron emission tomography, PET, is what they do is they do this contrast and they see what areas of the brain are being affected. And they typically do that in what's called the hippocampal area, hippocampus in the brain. Hippocampus is really important for your memory, long-term and short-term. We won't get too nerdy into this because we could go down rabbit holes, but if you understand there's a specific part of the brain that the medical establishment standardizes as checking for dementia, and that's the hippocampus. What we found in some of the more brilliant people in the Institute of Functional Medicine, things like that, like Rick Mayfield and things like that, who's on the board there, they're doing research about this, and they're understanding that it's really a certain part of the brain that can determine whether the neural integrity is there or whether there's neural decay. So what they use is magnetic resonance spectroscopy, where they're actually looking at using magnets and seeing how the brain is functioning, and they can slice it down with the magnetic resonance and see what's going on in there. And they can look for different things like N-acetyl-aspartate and fancy words like that, which we don't need to worry about now, but that's what you want to make sure. If you're going to talk to your medical doctor or the imaging specialist, you want to look at N-acetyl-aspartate as one of the big markers. But you also want to look at it's called the posterior cingulate gyrus. That's posterior cingulate gyrus is the specific part of the brain that's been identified as really specific for this N-acetyl-aspartate, which gives you a better understanding of how those neurons are functioning, and that's going to give you overall prognosis and or help you diagnose how far down the spectrum you or your loved one is. Several of the areas that people are not aware of are liver and intestinal toxicity. Big time problems because we're exposed to so many toxins all the time. What we need to do is be able to get them out. So you need to look at how well you're emptying your bowels so your toxins aren't recirculated, and also how well your toxins are being processed and emptied out of your body. That's the liver and the intestines. You can have parasitic and or viral infections in any part of your body. They can be in the brain, they can be in the liver or in the gut, which will affect every part of you because just because your brain's up here doesn't mean it's not affected by what's down here. So what goes in your eyes, your ears, your mouth, nose, everything that goes in determines your health. So it's very important you pay attention to that. Chemical and or heavy metal toxicity is a big problem. We are exposed to a lot of mercury here with Bayport, Becker, and Burnsville coal-fired power plants, but we're also exposed to toxins in the food, water, air, and things like that. So be mindful. You need a healthy detoxification system in order to get this stuff out of your body. Nutritional deficiencies, it's a big problem. The food we have now is not what we had 20, 30 years ago. It just does not have the stuff in there, especially since they stopped putting manure on the ground and recirculating or recycling the food back into the ground and feeding the ground. Now we have herbicides, pesticides, and all just Roundup and chemicals and things like that are going into the soil, which is affecting our food and what we're getting into our bodies. And the livestock we're consuming as well. This ends up interfering with our cellular membrane functionality, so how well the little globs we have as cells and how well they function. The junk oils we're getting in our bodies, it's going to change how those signal and how well we detoxify, and as well as how well we repair. So it's really important to understand that, as well as injuries to our body. We call them interference fields. They can be sprained ankles, they can be C-section scars, they can be traumas to the head from a concussion, and so on and so forth. So these are the things we specialize in finding. But infections are one of the driving forces for dementia, whether it be Alzheimer's. If you want my clinical experience, MS, ALS, dementia, Alzheimer's, all of that almost exclusively is some type of infection that has gone unchecked. And that could be in the teeth, could be in the brain, could be anywhere in the body. Gut infections, raging gut infections are a big problem. But that is a real big problem that needs to be looked at because it's completely disregarded in a lot of circles. But nutritional deficiencies, as we talked about, there's been a 50% reduction in the quality of the nutritional value in our food over the last 25 years. A 50% decrease over the last 25 years. That is staggering. It's only getting worse, which is why if you look at our Wednesday Wellness Minutes from last week, we talk about essential, important, and helpful. Get your greens, get your organic greens in because that's super important for health, feeding the bugs in your gut, but as well as feeding your brain and things like that, alkalizing your body. Getting things in like resveratrol and CoQ10 and green teas and things like that, they can quench the free radicals, which are they're called reactive oxygen species and ROSs and things like that. These things are basically, they cause damage in our body because if our body cannot neutralize them, like the Tasmanian devil that spins around and breaks things in like the bull in the China shop, if you can't quench or calm down these reactive oxygen species or the free radicals, your body's going to be damaged by them. So we need to have the proper nutrients like our greens and our antioxidants from the resveratrol and the CoQ10 and all the other things we can take as far as that goes to help balance that out. Neurodegeneration ultimately starts at the cellular level. So dementia doesn't start last week or last month. It starts 10, 20, 30 years ago. It could start when you're born, depending on how your gut microbiome is built up. When you're given a lot of antibiotics as a kid, it can determine how your brain's going to be when you're an adult and into your latter years of life. So it's really important. Ultimately, if these reactive oxygen species and these antioxidants are not there to quench the free radicals, it can cause excitotoxicity. Like the nerves in your brain get super excited, and it becomes excitotoxic, and then those cells end up dying off. So it's really important that we pay attention to that. They've done a ton of studies on the effect of fruits and vegetables. They've taken people that have been dementia-free and baseline tested them and said, that they found out there's an inverse relationship, which means the more fruits and vegetables you eat, the lower your risk of dementia as far as that goes. Drinking fruit juices and vegetable juices are very helpful. What you want to understand is when you go to Whole Foods or any other co-op or anything like that and they have the juices in there, those are basically void of nutrition, which is going to maybe break your heart. But you really need to juice it and drink it immediately. Otherwise, the nutrients they evaporate into air is basically what happens. So you want to drink them immediately after pressing them. So getting these fresh pressed juices from a store, if they do it in front of you, great. If they do it and set it on a shelf and ship it across the country, it's basically very expensive urine, if you want to look at it that way. So that will reduce your effect of dementia. In my research for this, I came across something called the MIND diet, M-I-N-D. So, of course, the mind, the brain. And it was really fascinating because they tried to blend the Mediterranean and what's called the DASH diet. Mediterranean, of course, people know about, eating olive oil and fish and stuff like that. That's great. And then the DASH diet is supposed to lower your blood pressure. So both of these, they tried to meld these together and they created the MIND diet. And basically it's, taking all the aspects of both and blending them together and saying, okay, eat lots of fruits and nuts and berries and things like that, and eat 10 foods and stuff like that. So what they recommend is eating 10 specific foods. And so you got your green vegetables, and you got your fruits and nuts and beans, and, well, they said whole grains, but if you would eat any whole grains from this country and they're not non-GMO, you're pretty much putting gas on a fire you don't want to burn anymore. So be careful, because some people have very low tolerance to grains, and if they're Roundup Ready grains, you're just going to trash yourself. So be very careful where you're getting your grains, but be paying attention to where you're getting your fish from as well, because if they're high mercury fishes and things like that, I just said fishes, high mercury fish, you want to understand you want to eat the what we call the low in the food chain, not the tunas and things like that are higher in mercury. Just look for, type into Google or Bing or Yahoo, wherever you type in yours, healthy fish or low heavy metal fish and things like that. You'll get a whole list of them. I'm not going to recite them here for you because you can easily find that information. Free-range organic poultry is helpful, olive oils and things like that. It's really helpful. What they recommend you stay away from are the things that are a no-brainer, right? Fried food, fast food, a lot of red meats like pork. Of course, if you know anybody who's Jewish, they don't touch pork. It's just part of their belief system. It's not a healthy animal. They condense a lot of toxins in there. But a lot of cheeses are very unhealthy. This diet, of course, steers you away from that. They recommend no butter, and definitely not margarine. But I would definitely suggest eating good butter. Good butter is healthy for you, not in excess, but in good butter. And then stay away from pastries and sweets. I mean, it's kind of like, okay, duh. But for some of us that have not been indoctrinated into this way of living, it's important to understand these things. So you get at least 3 servings of vegetables a day, and you get a starch a day. And you can type in the Mind diet and see the kind of the information they provide relating to that. In general, it's a good idea because you're decreasing inflammation and things like that. And it's important that you understand how these things are affecting you so that you can look in your daily life and say, how can I improve my efforts and how can I decrease the stresses in my body? So, am I eating too much sugar? Am I not drinking enough water? And things like that. What they've suggested in this diet is that if you follow this moderately, you're going to get probably a reduction of 35% chance of developing or the progressiveness of your dementia. They claim that if you follow it strictly, you're going to gain 11 years on your life, something to that extent. It's pretty impressive. I don't know how that works, but that's part of their hypothesis. So give it a shot for yourself. One of the important things I want to impress upon you to consider as you consider what drugs you're going to take, medications, pharmaceutical drugs, and what your doctor is recommending for you and or your family members are taking, there's a specific class of drug called the anticholinergic. And these can cause serious problems. Now, if you don't know what anticholinergics are, I needed to get a refresher on exactly what all they are, but they're pretty widespread. So they're for urinary incontinence, they're overactive bladder, for people with COPD, people for Parkinson's disease. The class of anticholinergic is actually Benadryl. So if you I'm just going to willy-nilly take Benadryl, all of these drugs will increase your potential for developing dementia or the severity of yours by 50%. So the bottom line is, make sure if you take a drug and you're worried about dementia or you're worried about dementia with a loved one of yours, you make sure that's not an anticholinergic, because these are going to control smooth muscle reactions, contractions in your body, which if your body's trying to do it, it's most likely important that it does it, okay? And if it is unexplainable why it's doing it, then you need help finding the root cause of that, and we can help with that. But it can potentially, this class of drug, this anticholinergic, can potentially increase your dementia risk by 50%. And now that is not an insignificant level. That's very important you pay attention to that, because 50% increase is really important to consider, because that is a huge jump, okay? That's flipping a coin saying, do I have dementia or do I not? What do I got? Oh, looks like I got dementia. Okay, you don't want that. So ask your doctor about alternatives to anticholinergic drugs. Okay, that will be beneficial for you. People don't often know what to say when they go into their doctor. Like, oh my gosh, I think mom's got dementia. What do I do? What do I talk about? How do I address this? What we want to understand is there's specific things. You want to walk in there and say, okay, are you just going to focus on the diagnosis? You're going to focus on the symptoms, or you're going to focus on the person and how it's affecting their life? Are you going to understand? Are you going to check into infections? Are you going to look at their nutrition? Are you going to look at the medications they're on? All of these things are critically important. What I look for when I'm working with a person, because I don't treat diseases, we work with people, we call them participants, because they're actively involved in their care. Stress, toxins, foods, hormones, infections, injuries, and neuroemotional stress. Okay? Stress, toxins, foods, hormones, infections, injuries, and neuroemotional stress. I would encourage you to talk with your doctor about all of those. And if they don't know how to evaluate for all of those, then consider finding someone who does. Because I found clinically that all of those are affecting everyone in some way, shape, or form. And you need to understand how to evaluate all of them and how to balance them if need be. So when you walk in there, you want to walk with a list of medications. If you can, bring them with you. Okay? We encourage everybody to bring their supplements and medications with so we can see how it's affecting their body and where it's affecting them, what organ system, where it's getting clogged if it is. Have a clear understanding of what your objectives are and present them to them, because the doctor is ultimately working for you. They are not omnipotent. They do not know everything. Okay? You need to be an advocate for yourself and your loved one, because there are standards of care, which means if you walk in with these symptoms, you're going to be labeled with dementia, Alzheimer's, or something else, and they're going to treat you with XYZ drugs, and that is called the standard of care. What you need someone to do is look at you outside of the box, or look at your loved one outside of the box and say, standard of cares are great when we don't know anything else, but we need to dig deeper. We need to find out the why behind your illness. Bring in a list of questions like, how is this going to work? Like, what is the prognosis? How do we turn the ship around? How can we affect a person's diet, nutrition, supplementation, things like that, and all that approach. And bring a notepad. Take notes and make sure you are asking questions and not pinning the doctor down, but saying, okay, here's our plan. Is that what you're agreeing with? Great. Okay, we're going to go forward with this. Here are our action steps. Here's what we're going to do next. Go do your homework, come back and check in at whatever interval they're recommending. You can take specific nutrition for the brain. We are very fond of the OptiBrain Renew. Literally, as the name implies, renew the brain. So anyone who wants to prevent cognitive decline, 1 scoop of this is great. For anyone who's suffering from cognitive decline, you could do 2 scoops of this a day. We have other things like when you decrease inflammation, you can use Opti-Inflammatory Resolve. Optimizing vitamin D is super important. Vitamin D controls the function of 1,000 genes in your brain alone. Just, they call it hormone D or vitamin D. Public service announcement, public service message. You don't get any vitamin D in Minnesota from September 9th to April 2nd. Okay, so definitely support your vitamin D. 5,000 international units IUs for an adult. Pretty much 33 IU per pound of body weight. So if you have a child and you're trying to figure that out, 33 international units per pound of body weight to determine the actual dosage. Okay, there's a ton of other things. You can decrease your inflammation, neuroinflammation. The list goes on and on. We can go over and over into this. You can take magnesium. You can take the fish oils. This is a specific fragment of the fish oil, pro-resolving mediator, and things like that. All kinds of stuff we can do to support that. You can use your greens, your superfoods. We've talked about in the past your HCl detox, hydrochloric acid detox. That's going to flush out any hidden infections in the brain and in the body. You can use DHA, which is a specific type of fish oil. It's specific for the brain. A lot of your brain is DHA. You can use B vitamins. You can use green tea. You can use resveratrol. There's a bunch of stuff you can use. Anti-infectives, we can use things for Giardia that's in the brain, or Toxoplasma gondii, or Babesia in the brain, or whatever it is. Whatever parasites we're working with, we can find them in the brain or in the body and help balance your body so your brain can be uninhibited and liberated from that stuff. You can focus on decreasing brain fog by getting rid of, or I should say, by balancing your mold and fungus in your body. The list goes on and on. CoQ10 is great for brain cells and heart cells. Getting heavy metal nano detox going on. HMND is what we use. So heavy metals are a big problem for the brain, and neuroexcitotoxicity. Using castor oil packs or mud packs on the brain, castor oil packs on the liver and the kidneys, or interference fields, injury sites to the brain. People with unresolved concussions and things like that, it's really important to resolve that. We can help you with that. We use a tool here specifically in the clinic called neurofeedback. If you go to a typical psychologist, psychiatrist, and that uses neurofeedback, what they do is that you have to do 60 to 80 sessions or so on and so forth to try and basically force your brain into functioning in a different way. So, for example, when you look at an EEG, you can look at things like cognitive deficiencies for the theta-beta balance at the back of the brain, so at CZ and O1. If there's high delta, that can be neural decay. Delta is like your deep sleep, incapacitated. Theta beta is like the balance between your foggy thinking and your active brain. You can look for the low-high alpha for cognitive decline. That's at the frontal lobe. There is, if you look at elevated theta at the frontal lobe, where your executive reasoning and cognitive function is up here, elevated theta, that's going to be foggy thinking, sluggish thinking, like you stand up to use your brain and your brain sits down or stays seated, not very helpful. F3, 4, so that's up here, F3, F4. If we have theta beta imbalance there, that can be a cognitive inefficiency, so your brain just does not, let's say you have too much theta over here, or too much theta and too little beta here, and it's opposite over here. If you have a difference between your brain, neurofeedback can be awesome for that. And we use QNRT immediately following neurofeedback, and we can take what would typically be 60 to 80 sessions and bring it down to 12 to 20. It's dramatic as far as that goes. So it doesn't have to be the 60, 80 session slog when you're hoping on a prayer that's going to work. We see dramatic results, and we can show you some of those results with you. But neurofeedback and the brain training supports the brain, helps it educate itself so you can get rid of these cognitive inefficiencies and these declines. But it also, what it does is identifies it specifically, as I've just mentioned, in the areas of the brain. You can see it right on there when there's excess stuff there. So I hope this has been beneficial for you as far as understanding more about dementia. We don't want to specifically talk about Alzheimer's because that's just one, and even then it's just some guy or gal who had their last name named Alzheimer's, and they said called Alzheimer's disease because it had a bunch of symptoms. Diseases don't exist. Diseases are collections of symptoms, and all they're doing is labeling people, and then you have to live down to that diagnosis. So what we say is ditch the diagnosis, live up to your full potential. So we encourage you to give us your questions. If you have any questions about this or anything related, please post them in the comments below. If you thought it was great, give it a thumbs up. I think we've decided that the mad face is how we're going to do the thumbs down if it upsets you, or if you thought it was confusing, or if I talked too fast or was confusing in any way. What would be better is if you posted a comment below about where you got confused and or what greater and further information you want, so we can provide that for you so that it's not as confusing. That's our goal, is to demystify these things and help you feel empowered to live your best life and things like that. If you have any ideas for future Wednesday Wellness Minutes that you want to learn about, like we've been processing these as people give us these comments, we'll do them. I'll put together the information and make sure it's impactful for you as best I can. Share it with your friends and family so that they become empowered to understand dementia and or neural decay. We call it neurodegeneration is really the class of issues as far as dementia goes, but let us know how we can help, okay? We're here to help you. We're here to support you. Give us a call if you have any questions. Comment below. We'll be happy to respond, all right? Other than that, we'll see you next week for the Wednesday Wellness Minutes, and be well for now. Take care, guys.